Sup peoples, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking all about heroes, your heroic protagonists, the star of your story, all that in here. And we're going to be breaking that down into 3 different sections: the core character, the circumstance, and finally a bonus chapter, which is going to be all about if you want them to fall from grace and turn evil. So let's get started. First up, at the end of the day, a hero is just a character, even if they are a good character. They require the same things that any other character would need: a backstory, a personality, and relationships. So let's get into section 1, the core character. First up, I do want to talk about backstory because this I found is the key to making sure your character isn't flat. I have written characters a lot now because they're my favorite thing to write. I have tons and tons and tons of characters, whether I've officially written them or whether they're just waiting to be written. The ones that are flat have no backstory, and the ones that are nice and round have backstories. I ran into this specific issue in the video above where I was working on my comic script and I was like, 2 of my characters I'm really happy with, and one of them I just don't like. He has no soul. He has no personality. He just has one descriptive word, and it's kind. And I realized both characters that I liked had a backstory, and the character I didn't like didn't. It was that simple. I had thought of moments in the other 2 characters' backstories that had shaped the way they act. It had given them flaws, internal conflicts, personality quirks, but this one character whose descriptive word was just kind, he didn't have any of that. I'd given him one backstory scene, but it hadn't changed the way that he acted as a character. So I think that if you're struggling with your character's personality, going back to their backstory and seeing if there are key moments that changed their life is really helpful. Whether you just want to think about that moment or if you actually want to write the scene. So backstory is super vital. Even if you're not going to write out a whole thing, just thinking about it once in a while or having a song that you think of as their backstory and their sort of like internal conflict can be super helpful. I come up with a ton of characters by just listening to one song over and over and over again and tying different lyrics to different things that happened in their backstory, and then whenever I need to get into that character's headspace, I will just listen to that song again. It's like, okay, great, I can write you now. The next thing that I want to talk about is relationships. Now, I don't just mean romantic relationships, although I do love a romance. Characters have these to every single character they ever meet. So whether it's the person that serves them their lunch, or the character that they want to spend the rest of their life with, they're going to have relationships with everyone. And the core relationships that build up your story are probably going to be within your protagonist's group. Now, not every story has the classic Harry Potter-esque hero group, but I'd say that a lot of them do. And whether you're going to have your little band of adventurers or what, you should still think about the relationships that make up your protagonist's life. Let's just use the example of my main character from Project Punk, which I will link the playlist of writing my comic above because it's got lots of comic book info, and also just because I need to advertise my own videos, so you keep watching after this one, because the algorithm wants that to happen, and so do I. Anyway, so my primary character, I forget what her code name was, so I'll just call her Sally for this video. Let's just say that Sally has a rocky relationship with her parents, and that this has altered her relationship with other characters. She was very independent as a teenager, and she learned to do things by herself. This made her a bit of a loner. Now, this translates into adulthood and her present situation, because with her friends, who I believe I named one of them Harry, and we'll call the other one John. These are just code names. So Sally, Harry, and John. Sally is now an adult. She no longer really has a relationship with her parents. She tries to do everything alone because she doesn't like relying on people due to this backstory. So her relationship with John is odd because he's her friend, probably her best friend. However, she still doesn't like to openly rely on him or really talk feelings. So they have a close relationship, but it's not just like we tell each other everything. And this builds small bits of conflict into their interactions, which makes scenes just a little bit more interesting. Then take Harry, for example, who is John's friend and who Sally doesn't really like in the beginning of the story. They're actually fairly similar, and that's why they grate against each other and don't get along. So it's all of these things that you can just do to add a little bit more depth into your story. In the first draft of writing Project Punk, I had everyone get along and be the best of friends. and it just read sort of flat. And in the second draft of Project Punk, I added in some conflict with Harry not really getting along with Sally. And it just instantly became more interesting to me, and the conversations became so much more fascinating in my mind. Think about a show like Andor. If you haven't watched this, please do. It's so good. I'm pretty sure that there's like almost every single conversation in this show is an argument. And people don't really get along. It's not like characters are sitting down and really bonding over things. It's pretty much just one minor conflict to one minor conflict to one major conflict to minor conflict. No one really sits down and has like a full-on heart-to-heart where everyone gets along. Once in a while, characters will be on the same side. There's so much nuance and in-depth conflict, even just underlying conflict in all the different conversations and scenarios, that just makes it more interesting. If your characters are just always getting along, it reads a little flat. This doesn't mean that everyone has to be enemies. They can still be allies, but even allies have disagreements. My sister and I love each other, we do everything together, but once in a while we just get on each other's nerves, and then we make up, and then we're friends again. And your characters can do the same thing. Them being the good guys doesn't mean that they always have to agree with each other. People being on the same side doesn't even mean they always have to agree with each other. Villains can get into arguments too. And if you're interested in villains, I have a video which I will link up above, which is all about villains, and it's sort of like the evil counterpart to this video. So if you like this one, you should definitely check that one out. The next thing that I want to talk about after relationships is internal conflict. Now, this is something that I also neglected in the first draft of my comic series, and is a big part of why I decided to do the second draft. All of my characters were just getting along and super chill, and they didn't have any internal conflicts. And then I watched a lot of videos on YouTube about writing, and I went, wait, my characters are boring. And they sort of were. So I went back and I rewrote their personalities. I kept the core things that I knew about them and wanted to keep, but I added an internal conflict to each of them. And it instantly just elevated their characters. They weren't perfect anymore. Not that they were perfect before, but they were a lot less perfect now. And there was also just an underlying tension to their decisions. They had a reason to be making the decisions that they were making. An internal conflict, it can be true, false, whatever the case, but it's something that's conflicting with or guiding your character to make decisions that might not be maybe the best for them. So going back to the example of Sally, her internal conflict is that she thinks that she has to do everything alone. She thinks this because of her relationship with her parents growing up, and a big part of her story is how she has to sort of navigate and eventually hopefully overcome this. Here, another example, my Dungeons and Dragons character. She is very guarded and secretive because she's a witch in a world where witches are not accepted. And she's had some rough past stuff because I'm one of those players that always gives my characters a tragic backstory, and this girl has like 5 tragic backstories. I'm really sorry, Lizzie. So when she met the adventuring party in the first session of our D&D campaign, she didn't want to stay with them. She didn't trust them. She has a lot of trouble trusting people and letting people in. And one of the most rewarding things for me as a player has been having her have these interactions with these characters that she automatically did not trust and did not want to trust, but slowly over the course of the campaign, we're almost on like session 50 at this point, these are her family. She trusts these people. Does she tell them everything? No. She's still struggling with that secretive nature. But it's not because she doesn't trust them anymore. It's just because it's automatic for her to not want to tell people things. And so this internal conflict that she's actively trying to overcome of keeping secrets, of not trusting, of keeping people just a little bit further away than she should. And she's overcoming it, and that is showing a story arc, an evolution of a character that went from being very guarded to now trying to be open even if she still struggles with it. Now, this ties pretty quickly into flaws, quirks, redeeming qualities, which is something that I feel like every character should have. Now, you can have flaws outside of the internal conflict, but to me, the internal conflict is the primary flaw, and if you're only going to have one flaw, it should be their internal conflict. And a flaw can be big, it can be small, it can be as simple as, I don't know, they're messy, or it can be as big as, I don't trust anybody and keep secrets constantly, even ones that may endanger you. That's a pretty big flaw, but you know, Lizzie is that, but she's also just sort of like uptight. And that's not like character flaw that she needs to overcome. I mean, maybe she needs to a little bit, but it's mostly just a quirk that shows her unique personality. And, you know, as I said, it's a quirk. So quirks, I feel like, are also important and under talked about. The line between a flaw and a quirk, I feel like is very fine. And really it just comes down to, if it puts people in danger, it's a flaw. If it drives people away, it's a flaw. And if it's more just like a harmless thing that they're just like, oh, they're doing that thing again, then I'd call that more a quirk. Let's take me, for example. What are some quirks about me? I ramble a lot. I talk a lot. I'd say it's a quirk bordering on a flaw. It's like a personality trait that I have that I don't totally want to get rid of, but I would like to rein in. I think that being talkative is fine, but when you talk so much that the other person can't get a word in, that's not so fine, and you should fix that. So I feel like a quirk, like a personality trait bordering on a flaw, is pretty normal. And then of course you have the redeeming, more heroic qualities. They are heroes after all. So what makes them the hero? What sets them apart from the villain or the mundane characters that are walking down the streets that we never know the names of? What makes them the hero of the story? So for example, Sally is a lot of annoying things. However, she's incredibly loyal. Despite all of the things that she's gone through with her trust issues, when someone does finally gain her trust and she understands that she needs to let you in so that you can help her and she needs to help you, she is super loyal. She will do anything for you. She will fight for you. She will die for you. And I think that that just makes her a little bit more heroic. Now that I've talked for a long time about the core character, which is gonna be the heart of all of this, so it's probably a good thing that I took a while on that, we can talk about section 2, the circumstances. What makes them a hero? This is a really simple question, but can you answer it? Why are they the hero of your story and not the person who was standing next to them? Why are they the hero of your story and not that person walking down the street right over there? You should think about this and you should have a reason for this. And even if it's just a case of they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and so they ended up embroiled in this whole thing, that's fine. You don't need a character who dons shining armor with their shield and sword and goes to battle a dragon. But you should at least have some sort of reason why they are in this situation. I personally love characters who are heroes who didn't really sign up to be heroes. So for me, I definitely do the wrong place, wrong time thing a lot. That's pretty much the situation that my characters from Project Punk find themselves in. But then something different does happen. They react to it differently than most people would have, which brings me to the next section. How is their reaction different to someone else's? So let's just say, this isn't exactly what happens in my story because I don't want to give too many spoilers, but let's take these guys, for example. Let's say that this is a potential hero. This is a potential hero. The villain's doing something evil over here, right? Both of these characters, they could go try and stop them or they could run away. One potential hero runs away, but maybe your hero would go up and try to stop them. Even if they failed, even if they know it's stupid, even if it's just like a gut reaction and they were like, oh no, why did I do that? It just sets them apart from other characters a little bit. For example, Sally in my Project Punk series, she finds herself in a weird situation that most people don't find themselves in. The wrong place, wrong time sort of situation. However, when given the choice between running away and staying to try and make a difference, she stays to try and make a difference. This simple thing changes her from a passerby to an active participant in the story. And that's what makes her the hero of the story versus someone else. Next, I just want to talk about a smaller point. Would they be a villain in a different light? Could other people view them as villains? Is everything that they're doing not necessarily great? Hey, Amon from Legend of Korra. He's definitely a villain. However, he and his anti-bending movement do make a sort of good point. The Benders in Republic City have all the power and all the money, and the non-Benders just don't. They don't have as many opportunities. However, that doesn't make every single Bender a villain, but it does instantly make you view them a little bit that way. So when you see Korra, who's the Avatar and has lots of bending abilities, just sort of like straight up be like,
Benders are the best. What are you talking about?
and they're like, you're a Bender, aren't you? It's pretty obvious that to all of those non-Benders, she is a villain, even though we view her as a hero. So think about how, yes, your villains are obviously going to be opposing the heroes, but could citizens, just neutral characters, neutral passerby characters, view your hero as a villain in any way? Next, I want to talk about bonus section, section 3, the fall. Now, there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about, sort of the do's and don'ts of having a good guy turn into a bad guy. Your hero shouldn't just suddenly become a villain. You don't want it to be too fast. It should be a slow progression. Now, this might be a controversial opinion, but I feel like in the prequels, with Anakin becoming Darth Vader, it's much too fast for my liking. It seems like in one movie he's great, and in the next movie he's terrible. It's just a little bit too fast for me. However, when you put Clone Wars in there, the animated series, there's so much more time to have him slowly fall, and you can see these little moments. You can see his slow progression from hero to villain, and that just makes it so much more believable. If it's a slow fall and you can see why, and you can see little flickers of it happening. Another thing to talk about with this is, why do they fall? What makes them turn from a hero to a villain? Now, with a villain becoming a hero, it's sort of obvious. They realize what they're doing is wrong. But with a hero becoming a villain, it's a little bit more convoluted because they were good, so why would they become bad? Now, there's a couple different things. I feel like disillusionment is what I would call Anakin's. I feel like he believed in the Jedi Order, and over the course of the Clone Wars, he steadily became more and more disillusioned until eventually he just realized, you're not the people I thought you were. I'm not doing what I thought I was. And he becomes angry, and of course you have Padme and the fact that he can't be with her, and Ahsoka leaving the Order, and like there's so much stuff. But I think that remembering that they need a reason to fall is important. They need a reason to turn bad. Next, obviously, if your story is about a character who is becoming evil over the course of the story right from the get-go, you don't have to think about this so much. But I would say not to make it too obvious from the start. I personally like it when you can see little flickers of the fact that they're turning bad, but you maybe don't expect it right when you meet them. I think that that's just makes it a little bit more interesting and believable. This, of course, depends on the sort of story you're trying to tell, so it's more a personal taste thing. The most important thing that I want to say is don't change their entire character and nature. They're still the same person. Their core character that we talked about in the beginning should still exist. Even if now they are bad or turning bad, their core character is the same. It's not like just because they were a hero, they're one person, and when they become a villain, they're one person. They're the same person doing different things. So yes, they may act different, but they shouldn't act entirely different. You should still maintain that core character. Now, thank you so much for watching. I need to go eat lunch. My tummy is a-grumbling, so I'm gonna wrap up here. But if you liked this video, please subscribe. It really does mean the world to me, and check out the villain counterpart video if you're interested in that. I also have more educational videos like this coming out every single Wednesday, as well as some comic book specific, more vloggy stuff coming out on the weekends. So lots of content. See you in the next video. Bye.